the thing is that the original framers of Enlightenment, some of them were well-meaning, others were not, and it's such a it was at the early stages it was such a complicated ideology that it was possible to dupe intelligent and well-meaning people. So there were, if you dig deep into the philosophical underpinnings, it's very, very unlikely that some of these works, at least, were hoaxes or were written as intelligence operations. The labor of love put into them and the complexity of the ideas is such that it would have been a not impossible, but one can explain it through perfect storm theory as opposed to a conspiracy theory on some of the stuff. But the main financiers of the Enlightenment certainly were involved in a conspiracy. So that's the real kicker, is that you have this tremendous body of philosophy talking about in the 17th and 18th centuries, which has some things which actually a person could learn from. Not that it is a perfect body of work by any stretch, but it is certainly not overtly negativistic. And there are, of course, in many great lies, I should say it this way, there are many elements of truth. And there has been yet to have been produced, perhaps for thousands of years, any works that are not divinely inspired, that are free of defect, right? But the problem, Morris, is really not an abstract one, because it is in the West, in all of the realm of the sciences, has adapted. Actually, science has come to mean naturalistic sciences, which means that there's an a priori assumption that we can't use our general experience in life and our intuition that may be spiritual or that may connect us to the distant past. So there's a sort of solipsism and narcissism in the Western model of the sciences. It's actually a problem not just on the epistemic level, which is the theory of knowledge or the philosophy or science of knowledge, but it is in fact perhaps rooted deeply in the Western tradition and is an ontological problem, meaning that they have actually wrongly defined existence. And by having wrongly defined existence, they operated for the past 2,000 years on the wrong footing. This was the hypothesis put forward by Heidegger. And he has had a tremendous influence on both neo-Marxist and neo-fascist and liberal thinkers as well. And these are words that are considered bad and ugly words in the liberal sphere. But as thinkers and as people trying to understand the world, we just use these terms objectively. So he has had actually a tremendous effect on Marcuse, who wrote a few works like One-Dimensional Man. And these are actually very important in understanding things like Pan-Arabism or Baathism or even Islamicism. And they're actually very important in understanding Bolivarianism or Eurasianism, because what was proposed and what Heidegger looked at and what those on the left and on the right, so those influenced by the Marxists and the socialists and the post-structuralists, post-Marxist, post-left, and of those that were inspired on the right by the conservative revolution, some of the thinkers involved in early National Socialism as well, right? They all actually sort of began to arrive at a similar conclusion, that the Enlightenment had failed to rationalize good. In other words, there's no rational reason why people should. Actually, there's no should. You see, there's only is. And there's no rational reason why people should be good. So as much as the Enlightenment, talks about light and these, the ideals of the Enlightenment could not be justified based upon the sciences which the Enlightenment produced as well, right? So there's no empirical basis from the five senses, right, that we should say one should love his neighbor, or that it's wrong to steal, or that it's wrong to kill. I mean, we can arrive at very mechanical, mechanistic reasons why we should kill 4/5 of the people on the planet. Why not? If it's going to be good for X, Y, or Z. I mean, there's no. So the Enlightenment project really failed to understand human beings, and it limited what we consider knowledge to a very, very small sphere of our human experience. So, to sort of summarize, Serbia, right? Serbia fitting into this. So Serbia is in an interesting position because they had been through the communist period, which in a strange way preserved a lot of the feudal and non-bourgeois or pre-capitalist modes of culture and family formation. The Titoist government sort of sat on top of this and sort of wallpapered or painted over a really non-bourgeois or pre-modern mode of life. And in a funny way, it preserved a lot of the features. The last 25 years, or the last especially 15 years in Serbia, has really been about cannibalizing off of the infrastructure that was built under the communist period. So when Vučić is now trying to figure out the course for Serbia, it's really not, it can be very confusing to speak of him as being either for the East or for the West. So that is really, the entire Western project hinges upon these very strange demands upon Serbia. So we talked about the Enlightenment and the philosophy of capitalism in the last 2 centuries, and then we wind up in the middle of Serbia, which is not unique in the sense that Armenia is going through a similar process, Romania, and countries that are in the Caucasus and in the Balkans that were caught between East and West and were not part of the Middle East and were not part of Europe, right? So they will be Christian by and large and not Muslim, but there was a form of Christianity which was free of Catholicism and free of the influences coming out of the Reformation, free of Puritanism and Protestantism as well. So it actually has a lot of the roots in the original Christianity in the first centuries of Christianity. And there's a strong anti-materialist and anti-modern tendency in Orthodoxy. So you mentioned Dugan. Dugan is also an Orthodox, but he's an old believer, which is a certain type of Orthodox which rejects the reforms to the church that occurred in Russia, I believe, under Peter the Great. So, but there is a communion between old believers and the mainstream church as well, and they've tried to reconcile some of these differences. In Serbia, there's a big problem with the church, and there is a location in Greece where it's a holy site, and it is a mountain where the different churches of the world each have a monastery of the Orthodox churches, and it's kind of like an informal congress, the kind that might have existed in Roman times in Constantinople or in the city of Rome. And there's a conflict right now there's a war raging in Orthodox Church, and it's probably aimed at destabilizing Russia as well. But there's a lot of things that actually seem like they're unrelated, but they all tie in.